Hello, hero. It's Lucy Lannon, your chittering, skittering, altogether glittering jagweed friend from the world not quite beyond. Here with a public service announcement, which will probably be relevant to you, but let it go if it's not. And before I begin, I just want to update circumstances, so if you're not interested in hearing such things, link in the doobly-doo if I'm allowed to use that term. I don't know whether it's copyrighted. I haven't been on for a while. I've been running the shop, link down below, but I feel like the changes that I referenced in my video with the Grogu thumbnail have been so big, it almost didn't give me any real intellectual energy to verbalise the kinds of things that were incoming, and I was getting guidance to just kick back, you know, just chill. I think at one point the just chill thing got pretty literal because I broke one foot and then had the other scalded and then had like a tendon issue in it, all within about 2 weeks of each other. So I was first hobbling and then unable to hobble at all. And it was very much a sit the fuck down from the universe. And I think that applied to all things, including this. Now, in the past with this channel, I've restarted it again several times, resolutely, absolutely promising that there will be regular content of a certain kind. And certainly there are strictures I will stick to, like there will be love readings at the end of the month, insofar as I'm regularly posting monthly. That was not a lie. I'm very sorry if you were looking last month and there was nothing up there. But I'm going to be less rigid in some other ways, right? I'm continuing the series that we've started, and I'm going to be doing semi-regular stuff, but also I'm going to allow myself to just not post sometimes. And I think, like, it's certainly not great for the algorithm, as you'll see by my subscriber count if you're viewing sort of any time in 2023. But it's like socially frowned upon, isn't it, to sort of come and go. It's almost like I have a responsibility to you guys, and it's seen as a dysfunctional or discombobulated behaviour to not check in on the regular. But my realisation recently is that insight is not something that behaves with a uniform regularity. That's not to say that I don't get regular insights, but it's to say that the correct time to express them, particularly under astrological influence of late, is not always when they come. And I might have the energy of a thing, but it might be months or sometimes even years before I'm able to articulate it within the setting that it's meant to be born. And YouTube, bless it, it's a wonderful platform, but it doesn't really allow for that. It doesn't really give in to the intuitive side of things in that way. So I hope that you'll stay subscribed if you are subscribed, and I hope that you'll permit me to have maybe periods where I don't say anything, just because I'm thinking, right? And that's allowed. I'm living as well. Like, certainly there's been a lot going on, and maybe we'll touch on that in other readings, but I won't bore you with it now, except to say different location, same career, but big courses of study under that in different areas, very different social group, very different romantic affiliation. It's just all going on. And the body has had its own interesting responses to that, as kind of touched on. So I'm sorry I haven't been here for you. I am. But you can always call on me through the shop anyway. And I'm going to bring a bit more hopefully not sporadic, but spontaneous content, right? I'm going to be checking in with just whatever I'm feeling sometimes. A lot of that includes this Maxfield Parish playing card deck. I always say Maxwell, and it's not Maxwell. That I primarily use for myself, for my own practice, to choose herbs, to get insights about dreams that I haven't correctly, or haven't adequately, should I say, interpreted yet, etc. This is my me deck. Don't fire evil eye at it. I'm sick of that shit. and also it's protected. It'll just backfire, honey. But it's kind of, this is a much more personal deck than I normally read with on a channel, put it that way. It's been involved before, but only sort of a bit. I can't find the words for this. I'm very rambly today. I think there's a great deal of fairy energy in what I'm about to say, but anyway, I hope that's all right with you. But yeah, so using my personal deck this morning, I was picking stuff out to respond to a situation I experienced yesterday, and then I suddenly realised, no, this is a public reading. And then I suddenly had a moment of, oh shit, I haven't been public for a long time. I don't know whether I'm ready to appear on camera again, physically changed. I don't know whether it feels correct to just put stuff out there and not know what else I'm putting out because it's not all scheduled yet. And I'm allowing myself, as possibly you can, to say, fuck it. This is important. Let's do this. So this is completely out of the blue. Yesterday I was walking on my normal kind of waddle route that I do. If you don't know, I am disabled, so this is my equivalent of going for a run. It's just kind of ambling through the same path again and again, and wherever I live, I find my path. Quite analogous, right? But on this one, it's a very straight route, and it's very sort of, the environment of it is unchanging, but obviously environmentally it changes for me day to day in a way that makes me feel like the stalker in the zone. Yes, that's not a Jesus tattoo, it's a Russian sci-fi tattoo. But yeah, so different stuff comes in. It's a good magical practice, I think, to do something repetitively and see how differentiation from the environment can feed back through that. And what I got yesterday was an artefact left out by two school kids who'd done like some homework on Mona Lisa and Da Vinci and stuff like that, but they'd kind of drawn all over the Mona Lisa. There was like angry eyebrows, a bit of a spliff going, some commentary here and there, and then a relatively good essay, I think, for what is approximately ages 8 to 12, speaking about Da Vinci, which is clearly the bit they handed in before they retrieved it and started just being children all over it in a delightful way. And the bit that really got me, really tugged at my stellium in Cancer heartstrings, was that there was a thing of, my name is such and such, and I did this bit of it from one little girl, and I was really good at this. And then there was on the other side a kind of, and I worked with such and such, another little girl, who was an absolute pest throughout. And it was very, very clear, big Uranian energy, which overlay on the drawing was from the pest and which was from the kind of good girl. But what I really adored about it was the juxtaposition of that friendship and the memory it brought to me of private little girl things, glittering little worlds. The way that, I know someone's going to call me up for gender essentialism on this, but to me it seems that little girls in particular have a behaviour that is perhaps enviable to people who are not little girls, where it's this like snickering, conspiratorial, glittery, let's look for animals right here, right now, and speak in our own secret language type energy. It's very private, in a way that I feel is a little bit different to the way that people born and socialised as boys play, which tends to be more kind of aggressive and explorative. And it's not less explorative for little girls, but it's whispers, it's secrets, it's making things for private reasons. It's very witchcrafty. It's very sort of braiding wishes into hair and into bracelets, and making up conlangs at the age of 11 that nobody else gets to know, that you remember 20, 30 years later and use in a different way. It's just a different kind of socialisation, and whether it's nature or nurture is something I'm frankly not prepared to get into onto this channel. And as you'll learn from the rest of the reading, I couldn't really give a shit either way. How you present what you identify with and what you think is biological versus non-biological behaviour. My point is that little girlishness is it speaks to the archetypal child in a specific way. And I almost don't want to say the inner child, because when we talk about inner child work, right, the operative word in that is work. It's very Saturnian, it's very dutiful. It's about breaking bonds, breaking patterns, promises that were made and never fulfilled, and oh, how terrible. And I say that as a trauma survivor. I say that as somebody whose childhood was very, very fucking mixed in ways that sometimes were obvious, and in other ways took me upwards of 30 years to really unpack and realise, oh, that wasn't cool, okay. So it's not that we can't include a little bit of love for the child that we were in a healing way. It's that I don't want you to come to this reading with healing as your operative paradigm. I want you to come to it with the energy of giggly excitement that those girls had when one of them said that the other was an absolute pest, which was a really naughty, kind of out there, giggly thing to say. And the other one responded with, I'm going to draw all over your work. And the unspoken thing between both of them was, this is completely safe to do because I love you and you love me and we're bestest friends. And I really like that, right? And I like the innocence of it. And what I'm getting to, in a very roundabout way, is that I wanted to do a reading for myself on innocence. I realised kind of overnight that something that I have to offer, being pulled to incense this now, something that I have to offer which perhaps isn't so common even in this community, is the level of innocence that I tend to hold, even when it doesn't diminish me being an adult. It doesn't stop me from, for instance, having a very sexual life. It doesn't kind of inhibit me from some cynicism, from some adult raised eyebrow at stuff, or indeed from functioning in an adult way, especially as someone who's a business owner, right? So it's very kind of, the two worlds are concurrent. And I don't mean to say, oh, I'm more innocent than anyone else. I mean to say that I've always been separated from my environment. I've always been kind of an outsider in some form or another because of my physical differences. And we can perhaps talk about that in another place if you want to. But if it's not interesting, that's fine. I'm not that interesting. But the sort of the distance from other things, and always being the kid who watched other kids playing outside and kind of couldn't for one thing or another, it's given me a preservation of the kinds of things that kids are preoccupied with without necessarily being less of an adult as I grew and changed and became eventually almost 36, which is quite a grounding thought. So I wanted to speak to people who maybe feel like innocence is a thing that is a nice exercise to think about as a memory and not something that pervades their everyday life now. My interests are quite childlike. My favourite films are often children's films. And again, I don't want us to get into the idea that that's a regressive energy. I don't want us to use words like man-child when we talk about people who are, let's put it real, like we're collecting dolls into our 40s in some circles, particularly within my generation, right? And we sort of like shame childishness at the same time as we operate in a culture which arguably is not very adult. And then at the same time we hold this cynicism, this kind of trend of nihilism under the apparent veil of critical thinking. We kind of hold that on a pedestal that diminishes the fact that sometimes we do just want to watch an animal video, or sometimes we do just want to pick flowers, or talk to somebody that isn't there, or sing a silly song that no one's heard before, or make a face, or, you know, all these very pure childlike things. And I've never had a problem with operating under that. And that's been a problem for some of the people around me, I think. Call it cardinal energy. I'm an obnoxious shit, really. But Again, I'm not meaning to be so self-focused. It's difficult to put across why this was so important for me without getting into relatively solipsistic territory, for which I do apologise. So yes, I took this reading on innocence, following finding that incredible artefact of being a preteen girl in a classroom with your best friend. And I kind of want to share what I've found. So this isn't one that I'm going to pull live, as you can see, but it is one I'm going to talk through. And I hope I'm not boring you. So we've got an Ace of Swords to start. A concept, a truth, perhaps something that cuts through the shit, right? This is the point of this reading. And if you're seeing it, you're kind of meant to see it, whether you like it or not, is neither in nor there really. You've invited it into your info stream, so deal with it. And you'll see down here, these kids are very occupied with what they're doing, right? They're tapping into this childlike energy that we sort of talked about before. I don't know whether this is my astrological placements, but I found as a kid, I always seemed to have some kind of objective, right? Even with very frivolous things, I had a goal in mind. One of the things that comes to mind is on holidays with a childhood friend, we would go on Vol Patrol, where we'd kind of keep our eyes to the ground and go on long walks looking for small animals. And it was very like, check sheet of what we found, you know, it was very... and there was no whomst are you finding this for, right? That's the thing about how children operate that is potentially something many of us have lost, that I don't feel I have. Maybe that's a witch thing. Comment down below if you're a witch and you find that as well. But it's kind of, the objectives themselves can be silly, right? The objectives themselves can have no point, although philosophically, no point is an interesting position. Do you really believe that anything has no point? And if so, why is it that you're on a channel that deals with synchronicity, fate in a non-deterministic sense, kind of embracing the stream of things that are brought to you to ponder, right? I'm not saying it's either one way or it isn't, but I think it's always important to examine the beliefs that we hold and why. So yeah, we're talking about childlike quests. Quest is a good word for it. I always think of the bit in The Dark Crystal where Jen looks at the sort of beautiful land, the Jim Henson fantasy verse that he's about to kind of traverse on his crystal quest, and says, all right, alone then. And that has like been repeated to me as a mantra throughout my life. Whenever I felt like an outsider, or whenever stuff's not worked out, or whenever stuff is working out, but I realise that I need to do bits of it kind of without the input of other people, which will come up. It's that little clip, which I can't show for copyright reasons. All right, alone then. And it's not a bad alone, right? And it's not an alone because it's dependent on the actions of others. It's an alone because that is the way in the end. This is the way. It's a hero's journey kind of a line. And children are amazing at the hero's journey. Hear me out, because they're not trying to be on it. They're not trying to do anything. They're not trying to achieve an objective that isn't just one that they felt good about in the moment. Not to sound too Abraham Hicks on all of you, but when was the last time that you set yourself a goal because you knew it would feel good in the doing of it, and not because you thought that you would be a fixed or a better person on the other side of said thing? That is something that is coming through really strongly, and it's been a theme for me over this time of feeling like I didn't want to be seen by you guys, because I sort of came to grips with the idea of being seen at all, right? Being observed, being semi-performative about the way one lives. Children don't have that. They couldn't give a shit whether they're being watched. This person here, I've had in a previous reading come up as an adult, perhaps an early caregiver, but it doesn't kind of have to be. It can just be the adult lens, watching over things in a way that wants to impose or project their own accumulated cynicism, or their own rule book for life, or their own criticisms, judgments of a child. And for many of you, when we talk about childhood trauma, we are talking about being critiqued to the point that original thought as an adult is something that you almost have to grapple with, right? It's an area of gaslighting, etc. I want to say to you first that if you're seeing this, the adult gaze, even as an adult, even now you are simultaneously a child and an adult. You're not an inner child and a real true adult. You are you as a kid now, and you are you as an adult now. And as you are now, you carry the adults around you then and the adults around you now. And to some extent, arguably, the adults you will come across. So be careful about what you invite, right? But also, like, the invitation thing is a bit disingenuous. Because what I'm really speaking about is that it doesn't matter what other people's opinions of what you're doing is. And it's such a simple truth that unless I took however many minutes of preamble we've just done to get to it, you might roll your eyes or, think, that's very Pinterest infographic, let's move on. But really, even if you're being watched, you can still be preoccupied with the nature of the mission. And the nature of the mission can be as simple as finding a flower better than the last one. Or in a more adult context, it can be, I have to do this incredibly high-functioning, kind of awful task. I'm going to sip my favourite tea. I'm going to eat marshmallows. Or I'm going to sit by the window so I can hear the birds sing. Or something like that. Children are so adaptive. And even children that have really traumatising childhoods, it's sort of rare if you ask a kid at the time over a few days that they tell you they're having a horrible time. And we can go on about developmental reasons for that, or things they're allowed to say, etc. But I think actually the truth of it is more like, even when kids are in a moment of crisis or a moment that isn't so great under an adult lens, or where perhaps the people around them are not behaving so well, or they're dealing with things that are so much bigger than a child should have to deal with. In the moment, they can be, crying or tired or tantrumy, but 9 times out of 10, they're kind of all right. And it's because their focus is on whatever's interesting to them. And this is what I mean about the hero's journey becoming kind of easier, because things flow a little bit easier, because the focus is narrowed. It's experiential, but it's not based on long-term goal-oriented experientialism. It's based on living and, smelling a flower or skipping over a crack in the pavement or whatever. That's not to say that children can't experience pain. That's not at all what I'm saying. Please don't misunderstand this as me saying that no child can experience negativity or trauma, or no child needs to be removed from a situation or whatever. That is not it. I'm not talking about safeguarding. What I'm talking about instead is that, having been one of those kids, if you kind of talk to that kid in the moment, what they're more likely to say to you is about their favourite dress, or their neighbour's dog, or something they're looking for on the ground, or something they did earlier with their friend, right? And that's not just because we're not probing deep enough, it's because that's the nature of being a child, and we don't lose it, but we almost seek to cultivate it out of us, because we think that being more long-term about things will lead us to have a more high-functioning result. And if any of you are magical practitioners, you will know as well as I do that that's not always the case. That sometimes the spontaneity of moment-to-moment decisions, even with the big stuff, is the stuff that gets you the most quote-unquote success in the eyes of Instagram, your parents, your ex-tutors, etc., right? It's a weird one. And I'm not telling you to live frivolously and discard it all. I feel like there's so many disclaimers in this reading, which sort of speaks to my point, right? I'm just saying that even if you're doing an adult thing, you can absolutely approach it as the you that is still a kid and wants it to be fun and wants it to be slightly less boring, eye roll, right? That sort of thing where I'm bored, and they kind of throw themselves on the ground. And it's a big distress to be bored, perhaps bigger than some other things. Because the idea of being bored is that they're not turning whatever circumstance into something of interest. Variety is important here, and it's one of the basic human needs, as many of you will know from coming from psychological paradigms, right? We need to be stimulated, we need to feel like the world is a big place. And being playful and childlike in all that we do is part of that. But the thing that has the potential to distract us from that state of ever playfulness, even when doing taxes, even when, helping somebody at a roadside crash, all of this stuff, it can be maintained through all of that, right? It can be maintained going under anaesthesia. I speak from experience. But we kind of distance ourselves from it almost because we feel the adult gaze. We feel that it's something we're not supposed to be doing. We have maybe a fear that if we have too much fun in a public way, others will resent us for having so much fun. And by God, is that hitting home? Because one of the recent lessons for me was about somebody seeing me having fun, or seeing me switch very quickly from a paradigm of sort of depressive ideation and all sorts of other things into one of pure excitement for what I was about to embark on, and having that person kind of turn shady on me because of it and try and further isolate me from my then circumstances as a response, right? Because it's like, how dare you be able to switch up your life this quickly? And I think there's a fear for all of us that this will happen. I don't just mean like envy. I mean just being seen as the fool, right? The full reverse energy of like perceived madness around the one who is actually exactly where they're meant to be. The one who is rolling their eyes and juggling in the street, actually being the kind of monk amongst us, right? For want of a better word. And that's not, again, to say, glamorizing mental illness and fetishizing the state of being some kind of guru. All of that's very, very Insta in a way that I'm not a fan of. But be willing to be mad, right? Be willing to be laughed at. Be willing to be silly. Be willing to be frivolous. Be willing to take part in activities that are shallow, which tend to be female activities. Hello, patriarchy, right? It's the things that women do to bond in their spaces together tend to be dismissed by the rest of society as unnecessary. Interesting, that, historically. Anyway, I won't get too deep into that one. But do stuff just for the fucking sake of doing it is what I'm trying to say. God, I talk a long time. I'm sorry. I think you know who this is for you or what this is for you, right? Before we even get into the rest of it, where I might elaborate on that bit. But the child still has the spade. Their focus is still on the ground. They're still on Vol Patrol. They're still looking for exciting things to do. You can look for exciting things to do in any circumstance. You can have your leg torn off and be looking for the most exciting part of that moment. That's no disrespect to anybody who's had the leg torn off. But without giving away too much, there's analogous things for all of us, yeah? It's not a fucking victim bingo party, and I had to learn that the hard way. And I literally had someone use those words to me a long time ago and didn't listen. Partly because they were playing victim bingo as well. But it's... Sorry about the pause there. I was in receipt of a small gift from me to me, which is sort of my point. That makes me think of Agent Cooper, right? Every day, once a day, give yourself a present. Don't plan for it, don't wait for it, just let it happen. Or something like that. It's not a game of who's the bigger victim, and I think we start to do that in adulthood because it's almost like with experience rather than innocence is when we realise we have been victimised, or when we realise that things perhaps were not as ideal as we made them out to be at the time. And there's a great deal of grief and loss around that, and I'm not here to diminish that experience in any way. My point instead is that we can realise things weren't so ideal, and we can bring our focus to what we did in the moment that seemed okay. And we can do it now again, right? And we can maybe in the conversations with people around us who are not experiencing ideal things, instead of kind of whitewashing over that, instead of doing this toxic positivity thing of like, oh, don't worry, it will all get better, everything's fine here and now, which is not what I'm trying to do. We can instead say, that really sucks, mate. I'm really fucking sorry. But hey, you know this thing that we both really enjoy doing? Let's do that right now. Did you hear about this thing? Right? There's a very different approach between it'll all be all right in the end, you're being too negative, being the kind of hidden bit of that, versus I'm here with you, I sit with you, that sucks, throwing to the ground, I'm bored, but here's the next good thing. And it's not just distraction. Again, that's the adult lens. It's not escapism to find the best bit of every moment in order to invite positive experiences towards you because you're in a positive relationship with positive experiences and they just love being around you because you love being around them. So I think I've rambled on for way too long for this first card, but what I want you to get is that these kids are just doing kid stuff. They couldn't care, right? And that's important for you. What is your kid's stuff? I don't mean then, I mean now. Give yourself fucking permission, right? And I hear a lot of like content creators and whatever saying, oh, give yourself permission to connect with the inner child, to do a childlike activity. If you enjoyed colouring books, maybe you could purchase. That's not at all what I'm getting at. There's something in your room right now for free, or in your car, or in your walk, or wherever. There's something good you can do. There's a patch of sun you can sit in, right? That's what I mean. You don't have to buy it. You don't have to resume a fucking activity or teach yourself a skill that you haven't had since you were 10 and played the violin. This isn't about a reconnection. You're already there, mate. You are you. You've never forgotten the things that made you you, right? You've just sort of put them under an adult lens, perhaps, if you're saying this. You've just sort of gone, I can't sit in the sun and make bionicles and eat watermelon. Hello, if you're watching. I have to do adult work things and I have to work on my body and I have to be there for this person who arguably is or isn't there for me in return. How about instead of being there for people, we're just there with people, having a party, right? A formative thing from my childhood, again, that I'm sharing, sorry for overshare, is I love like buddy movies in the sort of vein of Bill and Ted, Wayne's World, Encino Man, that are just about being together, being fun. And in at least two of those, part of the kind of catchphrase is party on, right? We always remember to be excellent to each other. That is very, Jesus, Buddha, etc. It's a good thing to have a religious reminder of, but we forget the party on. Each moment is meant to be celebratory. And yes, shit moments as well. That's what trickster energy is about. It's what all trickster myths touch on, is that you can take the most taboo, bullshit, awful things and make them into a fun game. And actually, that's the thing that evolves the community fastest. Not trying to fix those things in the traditional paradigm that was given at the beginning of the tale. Let's move on. Five of Swords, Marketplace. When I say marketplace, some of you have already clocked into what I'm going to say next. Imagine you're a kid and you're inundated with adverts, right? I used to love watching adverts on TV when I was a kid. I grew up 80s and 90s, so they were arguably a very choice selection of things that would now be seen as incredibly cringy and stylised in a particular way, which I still find aesthetically appealing, if nothing else. And what I enjoyed about them was the variety of messages coming in and the kind of playfulness of them and the fact that they were brief and I could just think on an idea and jump to the next thing in what I now understand to be a kind of early augury, right? This topic is related to this topic, and I didn't kind of put them together in a logical sense. I was just feeling my way around, and then that would inform my play. And as I got older, play became activity, right? Play became functionality, and it informed that as well. It's kind of this channel hopping vibe. And we get ads or commercials, if you're American, in a different way now. But the same thing is still applicable. A good modern example of how you can take something which we all have a set paradigm around and transform it into something utterly beautiful in a completely different way is Brian David Gilbert's recent video, Don't Tell Your Wife About This Game, which starts with sort of sexually inviting pop-up ads about shitty phone games, and ends in a place of speaking about fidelity in long-term partnership and why people are unfaithful and how we can heal. All in a magnificent video of a man in several lovely dresses being far too charismatic for his own good. This kind of thing is what I mean, right? If you were to look at those ads that he was inspired by, very few of us would see it in that BDG way of like, oh, I need to write a song about marital infidelity and deeply heal most of my viewers. Instead, we would go, oh, pop-up ad, we're having a reaction, whether that's the reaction of, oh, I'd quite like to play that game, or whether it's sort of more my end of like, oh, I hate this pornification of things at the moment. It's a little bit tiring. I'll move on. But there are things to be taken from that same ad. What if you were trying to emulate the close of each bit of ad you see? What if you were picking out divination meanings from each colour that was involved as a major background in a pop-up ad? What if you were taking combinations of words that were used, like picking every third word that someone uses trying to sell you something in the ads on a YouTube video, and I will keep this with ads if it's monetized so you can try it, so that you can kind of form a sentence with, again, like an augury method. That's the kid's eye view of the adult thing. But when we're talking about the marketplace, we're also talking about a more general sense of what's being sold to us and whether that indeed diminishes our ability to be innocent. I'm not going to get too much into stuff that's been very well spoken about by people like Cal Newport about kind of digital inundation, the proliferation of information with a kind of a capitalist viewpoint to it. But what I will say is that, you know, the messaging isn't just you're inadequate, so I'm going to sell you makeup to make up for your face and call it a celebration, or, you know, sell you insurance and not call it fear. Call it security, or, you know, whatever. Like, yes, true, but what I also want to say is think of the advertising that you're getting from friends under social media. There's been a drastic change that I've really felt quite split by in a way that allows the gold in. From, I would say, the end of the 90s onwards, I think it's interesting that we're having a resurgence of like Y2K culture being really trendy, because that, for me, that was my teen years. And it's kind of the point for me where we stopped thinking in a certain fashion and started advertising ourselves as commodities. That's all very common to point out. But I want you to think of even the people that you love the most and the dearest as advertisers for a moment, and ask yourself what it is that they're selling and how their assertions, in the same way as major advertisers, their assertions about what it is that you might need as a result of what it is that they need to present affects how you think about the world. I hope that sentence makes sense despite being grammatically strange. Sorry, I'm just really like booming through with the channel at the minute. It may be all over the place. I do apologise. So what does this look like? This looks like your friend on social media is prioritising a certain thing, and they may feel genuine concern for you if you don't. But that's not the game you're playing, or it's just not fun for you, right? And again, fun is paramount spiritually, magically. That's not to say we should be hedonists and be dicks to other people, obviously, duh. But we put too much emphasis on a kind of productivity which is very Saturn based, very Saturn cap actually, and that's, you know, recently shifting. I want you to stop being goal oriented, even in the way that you interact with other people. And I want you to really start to separate your journey from the journey of people immediately around you, no matter how much you fucking love them. I feel part of the reason I've taken a break is because I've come to that freedom for the first time. I've allowed myself on a day to sometimes leave things to the last minute even and just trust that it's going to be all right, because my priority is moment-to-moment playfulness and engagement with the sort of cosmic nature of my surroundings. And again, not advocating for irresponsibility. And if you struggle with that, perhaps this isn't the component of the message that's for you, and perhaps structure would be good. Everything's a balance, right? Tarot tells us that. I need you to be okay with your primary objective being joy, no matter whether the immediate sources of that joy are something that is being sold to you by your loved ones who also bring you joy. I need you to put yourself, at the risk of upsetting some people in order to be okay now. And I don't mean okay in a fixed way. I don't mean, oh, the big okay. I don't mean, oh, your message really choked me up. I mean, is this even fun for you? Bro? Is the way that you're behaving right now even like deathbed good for you? You know? Many of us experienced major transitions, major life changes during the pandemic, because we were all fucking locked indoors like some of us spiritual teachers have been forever. To just be like, look at what you've made. And to realise that actually it wasn't glitter and pasta shapes, and that was a bit disappointing, and perhaps we should leave, or perhaps we should transition, or perhaps we should, you know, some kind of major change should be put in place because it just wasn't working out, and we hadn't stopped long enough to be like, oh shit. And this is a sort of smaller version of that, right? The childlike state is a moment-to-moment understanding of things in, is this still fun? If it's not, we absolutely don't even need to seek fucking permission to be something else, right? Notice how a game of Let's Pretend often evolves between characters based on how the kid is feeling, right? You start off as a princess, then halfway through, it just seems a bit more informative to be a pirate. It just seems more appropriate to circumstance that you're a rocket now, and that's okay. And I'm not really speaking to identity here. I'm just sort of talking about the level of flexibility that I think is the real bit that we're missing. And I mean missing in the emotional sense, right? We're not missing anything. You're not deficient. You're fucking perfect, dude. And I love you. And everyone around you loves you, or they wouldn't bother, right? Even your enemy. They wouldn't be so bloody engaged unless you were compelling. It's all fine. But you can change within that. It's safe to just do the thing in the moment, right? Be instantaneous. Have a bit of that cardinal energy that I've maybe got too much of. And if you're feeling frustrated by what I'm saying, because you're like, well, I don't have the privileges that allow me to be so adaptive. It's all right for you because, really examine that. Who taught you that you can't play because of these circumstances that you're in? Or what is it about your circumstance that you believe prohibits you from play? And if I may, what would you be doing if that wasn't in your way? What is it that you're mad that you're not doing, is what I'm trying to say. Because that's at the root of all this identity politics arguing, all this kind of performative virtue signalling where we take each other down and sometimes even get physically violent with each other in the name of non-violence and in the name of everybody being accepted, right? It's a very fucking weird thing that I don't really engage with anymore. But it's very like, I want a world where everyone's happy, and therefore I will protest and I will be in the unhappiness space, and I will absolutely focus on all the areas within which I'm not okay and you're not okay, and I will rehearse that truth until I'm blue in the face, right? There's something about that that's antithetical to the way that we could be operating. And there's something about it that doesn't even occur to a kid, right? Kids do want to change the world. They love that shit. How many school projects have you seen with someone earnestly drawing a picture of planet Earth and being like, when I grow up, this is going to be different? And it's not that we really lose that. It's that we start to tie differentiation to difficulty. That's it. That's the crux of what I was meaning to get at. What is it about being adaptive that is prohibitive for you? What is it that you would rather be doing and that you're mad that you're not doing because of the disadvantages that you do genuinely have? And I accept that, and I'm here for you for that. And kind of what is it that, you know, within your adult gaze, right, whether this is external or internal, whether this is marketplace or self, what tells you that you need to suffer in order for progress to be made? Or that because you have suffered, there is more dutiful action and there is more seriousness and less play in the rest of the day for you, never even mind the rest of the next 10 years. I'm somebody who's had a prognosis given to me at several stages in my life which I've outdone. I've actually got a Reaper trap tattoo because me and death have a strange and interesting relationship. She announces that she's coming. Everyone around me tells me that that's true. And then she just kind of stands there and is like, not today, but maybe tomorrow. And then I'll go another few years and they'll give the signal again, right? And it's to do with having a kind of rare set of conditions, collaborating with each other in an interesting way, which I am actually grateful for now. It took me a while. And something that I've found with people who don't have that is that we speak a lot about what we would say on our deathbed or what we would do if we had a year to live or yada, 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 with this aspirational, transformative energy of like, oh my, if that was really my reality, I would absolutely make this change, right? When you live in it, sometimes actually what happens is that you freeze and you cry and you lose all your friends because you become a fucking bore to be around. Or you lose sight of your values for years, if not decades. Or you negotiate the long term so much that the short term becomes drudgery and pain. And then you sort of wish that it had come sooner in a weird way, you know? It's not everyone's experience, but it's a valid experience and it happens. And I've always wanted to talk about it, and I think this is the moment now, actually. And if that's been your experience, I want to say, hey, I see you, it's okay, right? It's all right to feel like that. It's all right to actually have somebody ask you to reevaluate your worldview, and that makes you want to give up, or it makes you want to stop dead. I stopped dead for fucking years. Just this last time it happened, and it's happened a few. And I'm still working to a current forecast of so many years. And then when I get there, they might say different. It's kind of not about that. I think the problem with this is that we're still taking a long view. Even if we're saying a year to live, a month to live, we're still taking the view of a year or a month. We're not now, we're not playing. Or we're playing at the let's pretend of a life of a person that we want to get to eventually by fixing the person that we are now. I almost want to say you can't get to joy through a lack of it. And I know that's been said in a different way in the law of attraction community or whatever. And I know that some of the things that they say in that same community are a bit ableist and I don't like the word problematic, but there it is. It's still fucking true, right? You can't, unless you decide to go on your Vol Patrol, to go on your little mission, speak in your little conlang, to do the whimsical thing that your co-workers will raise an eyebrow at or whatever. You're still thinking very long-term in a very dutiful fashion, and you're still a little bit trapped by that maybe. And it still brings the adult in. And again, the child really doesn't give a shit about the adult. They do give a shit if the adult is punitive and abusive and whatever. I don't want to detract from that. But in the moment that they're on the mission, they're not feeling the pressure of being observed. They're just on the mission. You absolutely can, within a day, be 20 different people doing 50 different things, all of which are adding pleasure to the things that, yeah, in the end you kind of have to do. And I think if I'd had that kind of short-term thinking when I was much younger, excuse me, perhaps I wouldn't have had to have the lesson that I've had repeatedly, you know. And I don't know whether that means that I would have just been told straight away, you'll be really long-lived. Actually, you will live out of childhood. Actually, it won't be a couple of weeks, or it won't be just till your teens. It'll be at least till you're 36, you know. Maybe I would have learned that. Maybe I would have been told even longer, like how much I actually get. Who knows what that is. Or maybe it would have been the other way. Maybe I'd have lived so fully in the moment and experienced things in such a playful and true way and an integrity to what the moment is offering, in terms of, this is my favourite colour in the place I'm in right now, this is my favourite sound, this is where I prefer to be, this is how I prefer to sit, this is the pleasurable thing I can find in this strenuous activity, etc. Maybe then I would have packed so much in I would have died sooner, who knows? Right? But it's kind of neither here nor there. That's why I've got the Reaper trap. Because in the end, that's still the adult observation that I shouldn't give a shit about. Who cares what death thinks, right? Who is she anyway? She's probably busy. There's a lot of people dying, right? She has shit to do. I really hope that this incoherent rambling is becoming coherent for you in a valuable way. Let's move on, shall we? These two came together. And they were this way. Four of Cups, Ten of Cups reversed. So we're speaking about an offering from the universe and the resistance to having our bliss, whatever that means to us, the resistance to community in particular, because the Ten of Cups is not just completion and realisation in terms of what it is that we want for ourselves, but it's particularly like an interdependent and community-based version of that. That can mean friends, that can mean family, that can mean lovers, that can mean online community, that can mean interaction with nature, with non-human friends, you know, of all kind of paradigms. So you do you for the Ten of Cups, as I always say on this channel. But the Four is interesting, particularly because it's a knock at the door. I think this is your door. I think it's mine, you know, me, you. There's kind of a unification in this reading of both of us, and that's why I'm speaking so personally for first time in a long time. So, there's a person here knocking on your door. Let's call these both opportunity. One bit of it is giving a bit of a cynical look, a bit of a kind of, well, not cynical. It's more of a, really? Is that what you're doing right now? Are you sure? And that's not in a punitive sense. That's not in the sense of the things that we're sort of ignoring over here. It's much more in the sense of, is that really how you want to play? Is that the outfit you've picked? Is that the let's pretend that you've selected? If you're more of a kind of gaming person, is this the correct bit of Choose Your Fighter? Or did you just pick the thing that you thought would win? Because for many of us, I should say, in case it's not immediately obvious, there are options more fun than winning, right? And I want to say it's like a sort of Socrates twinkly energy. It's like a Merlin twinkle of like non-punishing. Is that working for you though? Are you sure? Do you want to rejig before we really start? Right? Because this is something wonderful coming to you. And that perhaps is the subject that you came to this reading kind of for or about, this thing that's incoming. But you need to understand some shit first. I'm noticing there's both glitter and soil on my hand, right? That's indicative for some of you of some truths. So you got this one person going, mate, really? And then there's the other aspect, holding the book of knowledge, knocking on your door, about to hand over a load of stuff to you that's completely going to kind of change your world and not just your paradigm. So change your 3D and not your 5D if that, feels good to you. But this person has got their kind of opaque Frank Miller lenses on, right? They can't see the door that they're knocking on, or at least in this reflection on the lenses in this imagery, it looks like they're blind. Opportunity is not watching you. It's coming back to this. Opportunity is not observing whether you've behaved well. The universe is not fucking Santa Claus. You're not going to be rewarded if you're a good little boy or girl, so much as you're going to invite opportunity by behaving in an opportunistic fashion. It's such a derided word, isn't it? When I say opportunistic, you think manipulative, many of you. But opportunism makes me think of fox spirit, and it makes me think of the sacred idea of that, and the sort of being a bit tricky, but in a way it's just dancing with the universe it's got integrity to it. And it appears to the outside like it's doing an underhanded thing because it's just not operating like other people operate. And that's fine. Right? And sometimes it uses the way that other people do operate to get what it wants or to teach them a bit of a lesson I don't mean in a revengey way, I mean in a universal cosmic lesson way. It's very Uranian for anyone who's got strong Uranus aspects, by the way. It's very fool, right? And this guy's sort of dressed like the fool. We talked earlier about the perception of madness in those willing to do moment-to-moment things, including humming to themselves or singing in the street or befriending a wild animal or whatever it is, right? He's wearing the fancy dress of the fool to say that he's of that thing, and he can't see you. Or he doesn't give a shit. But he's knocking anyway. Opportunity comes whether or not you have been doing the thing that society will reward you for doing. Whether you've purchased the program, whether you've fucking presented yourself in a performative way to the outside world in a fashion which is going to make people kinder, because sadly that's one of the realities we live in, right? It's whether or not you've had the job that everybody wanted for you because they thought you would be more financially secure, and they didn't realise that it might be at the expense of your bloody soul. It's all of these things. Opportunity knocks regardless of whether you're being good, right? And going back to the original purpose of this reading, when I looked at that little artefact from school for these two girls, the thing that popped out to me about their formative experiences and the things shaping their childhood years had nothing to do with whether they were in line with education and curriculum. It had more to do with how they interacted with each other in a complete state of trust despite difference. Something I'm getting very frustrated with that I'm seeing a lot online, particularly in the identity politics type circles, although I'm not anti that politically and I'm not on the other end of the spectrum. There's a lot of like, I can't play with you. Caroline Casey speaks about this very well in her sort of trickster, I think it's in the Citizen Trickster course she did, but it's It's this like ideological paradigm of, I have these values and beliefs and I live in this way, and if you're not that way, you can't sit with us. And dare I say, if you're not that way, you must be bigot, you must be unaware of your actions, you must be operating from a place of privilege, you know, fill in the blanks, like whatever's thrown at an opinion which wants to discuss things in more depth or offer a contrary worldview. And we're sort of doing this to demonise people who are different to us, and it's preventing both of us from just sitting at the table and having a natter about what we both believe is the real issue and coming to some kind of agreement and compromise and dare I say play, right? That is kind of at the basis of my political stance, actually, if anybody is wondering. I'm not really left or right or centre or any of it. I'm kind of like, in Caroline Casey's words, woof woof wanna play. I'm more about, if you're against dialogue, you're probably not in my corner. And that's in both a sort of forceful, martial, hyper-traditional, hyper-capitalist, dictatorial dickhead way. But at the other end, it's also in the media control, the sort of things that Chomsky talked about with kind of manufactured consent and selling somebody an ideology without actually telling them you're selling them that, and kind of demonising anybody different and playing who's the bigger fuckhead and who's sadder. None of these things are cared about in terms of your opportunity and your experience. And all of them are selling something back to the marketplace, right? You're told that you're a better person if you stand for this thing in an angry energy. You're told that you're a better person if you absolutely deride someone from having a slightly different experiential perspective on an issue which you've held dear. You're told that you have to be performatively part of your subgroup of tribe and ideologue in a way that is corresponding to the integrity of that group. You're told not to enjoy things from the past which you may formerly have enjoyed with less knowledge because they don't conform to that group's mission statement at the moment. All of these things, my dear, erode on our happiness in the present, and none of them stop opportunity, but they do stop fun. Opportunity knocks regardless of whether you're behaving, right? I hear spiritual speakers talk about behaving in the sense of parents, in the sense of early caregivers, early mentors, teachers, society at large, but I don't hear much about this thing of behaving in the eyes of your own fucking value ideology and how it's socially represented and what that's selling. And it's just, I see so many people trapped by this. Be who you am. And more importantly, invite people to your table who are completely different, providing that they're not immediately imposing the threat of actual violence upon you. Sit and have a chat, right? Because kids would. Kids take somebody completely different to them, maybe even holding a weapon, and they say, hey, do you want to join in? Yeah, cool. And again, I'm very much, I don't want to plagiarise Caroline Casey, but it is the woof woof wanna play, right? Everybody's involved in the game, everybody's at table, or nobody is. Opportunity is knocking, and something is saying, are you really sure? And the Ten of Cups in reverse, I'm reading in this particular case, this is your Ten of Cups, this is too many cooks, spoiling the broth, right? This is too many contrary opinions, too many ideas of how to reevaluate and fix yourself. Do you need to be fixed? Would the child you enjoy the statement that you need to be fixed? Or would they rather be looking for bugs with a microscope? The choice is yours. Yes, you have issues to work through. Some of those can be worked through in a more enjoyable way. That's why you're seeing this reading. And not everyone will see it, because not everybody needs to hear that shit. And if you survive this long, despite my solipsistic and unexpectedly politicised perspective, then you were meant to hear from me on this. and have a bit more fucking fun and tap into that glittery, conspiratorial, whispering, conlang energy that I indulged in when, on my walk through the brambly bit of the grass, I saw an artefact of a different time and also of a present time. And I realised that my childhood, the sparkliest bits of it, were happening parallel to the present moment. It was still the same. It always is. It's always there to tap into, right? No matter what circumstance you're under. No matter how big a deal it is that actually you do need to sort this shit out. You know, and that can be your own behaviour sometimes. I've done that as well, right? I'm not speaking as somebody who's had outer circumstance inflicted upon me in some big bad way, but never fucking done the work and never realised that actually they were probably an asshole for several decades of their life. And they might need to fix a bit of that. It's not to negate any of that good work, right? It's to say that simultaneous to that, it doesn't have to feel like work. It doesn't have to be excruciating. It doesn't have to exclude other people from community. As Caroline Miss, I always forget, would say, we're all crewmates on this ship. And the only reason you do healing work is to get to the position where you can help the rest of the crew, because otherwise it's useless you being on board. And again, I don't want to be too punitive with that. I don't want to say life is pointless without helping other people, because that's also getting into risky business, right? We don't want to go that far. What I want to say is that the happier you are, the more you're of use. And in the end, the reasons that you want to fix yourself and your behaviour and your life and whatever, and go very goal-oriented and do all these magnificent things that you've been doing, well done, is because you just want to be happy enough that you can spread that to other people. But you can kind of do that now, here. And actually it'll make you happier to do that now and here. And to be vulnerable with it, and sort of why I'm being vulnerable with you and why I'm doing this video in a weird way and probably talking shit through a lot of it, is me doing that with you, right? Let's be kids together, let's play. Let's engage with it in a slightly different way. It doesn't mean that you have to stop any of the behaviours that you're doing to protect yourself or to improve yourself or to improve your circumstances or to keep dependents alive or to care after ailing mothers or whatever it is. I don't care what it is, actually. I mean, I do care. Share down below what's going on with you, but in the bigger sense, right? I don't care. Opportunity doesn't care. Childlike spirit that we all share between us, because in the end we're all one thing, doesn't care. Your circumstances are wonderful to reflect back to you what it is that you can do next and how you can squeeze all the fucking joy out of it right into your mouth like squirty cream or something. That was a bad analogy because you don't squeeze cream, you squirt it. Like honey in a sponge. You get me, right? You get where I'm going. And what a shame it would have been if I felt too vulnerable to share this today and you didn't just listen to it. And I didn't work through it as I'm speaking and realise some shit, you know. And what a shame it would be if you didn't then think actually about the sorts of things that you really did used to enjoy as a kid that aren't useful in the adult sense of tapping into the inner child or fucking working on your skill set that you've always had to master your career. I don't know why I'm using this voice. But just the pointless shit, right? Who did you dress up as? For me, it was Jim Carrey in The Mask. I feel called to say that. I was Cuba Pete for a good portion of being a kid. But I was also Jen, and I was also Kira, and I was also Bill and Ted. And I was also, very occasionally, if I let myself, Barbie, even though contrary messages to that were coming in from an early stage, right? And it kind of doesn't matter. It's just, it was all fun. I want you to think of the stuff that you did just for the sake of fucking doing it, and do it now. And I don't mean buy the doll. I misunderstood this message actually in about 2017. I think it was like, yeah, I think it was, I don't want to say it was a midlife crisis point, but it was certainly the year that I had already had a stroke. And I bought, what is it? Little Miss Singing Mermaid or something. It's this like terrible 80s toy that's a colour changing mermaid when you immerse it in water, and it has very big hair, which is a big thing for me. And it when you press it, it sort of goes, oh. It's dog shit, it really is. And I got super excited because I found one on eBay and I was like, I'm going to buy it for my inner child. And then I got it and I didn't want to play with it. And I ended up giving it to my stepkids, right? It's sort of, I think the universe was pushing for me then to tap into what it was about Little Miss Singing Mermaid that I really needed without having to fucking buy her and then see this bit of plastic on my floor and think, well, that was an impulse purchase. I'm not proud of that. And it was so silly, guys. It's become one of my favourite things. But I even sort of like went, oh, it's just that I'm not adapting her to my adult witch self. And then I like drew a load of makeup on her and covered her in sigils and things and made her like really wacky. And maybe that's a fun thing to do that you want to do, I don't know. But for me, it wasn't the point because I did all of that and I made this like vaguely goth Barbie mermaid out of her and it still wasn't right. And it, like, all that came out of that was that my partner at the time was just side-eyeing me like, are you having a breakdown? Are you okay? Because, you know, I was doing this while they were, like, fixing their car. And I could have been doing comparatively adult things. It's because that wasn't the point, right? It wasn't that the act of play in itself was a bad thing. It was because I'd put my money into, like, this paradigm that we have of like, oh, buy this thing and you'll feel better, right? Buy your childhood back again and you'll experience what it felt like to be in the moment. No, you have everything you need now. That's my point, right? If you can't do it without buying extra tools, it's probably not right for you here. Ooh, that's the thing, isn't it? Some of you that pinged off. Let me know. I've told you more in this reading than I think I've ever shared about myself on this channel. And I feel good. I feel sunny. This is all very sun card. I can't remember whether I said that, right? Be vulnerable. Be wild. Be unafraid to look like an absolute tool and get side-eyed by whoever you're around. And if you're very lucky, they'll side-eye you and laugh with you. And then you know you're onto a good thing, right? And then that's something to celebrate. And then that's somebody to say, hey, do you want to play? What should we do? You know? You've got a really heavy day, so let's do something after work. Or you've got a day where you can't fit anything in at all. Okay, let's just now in this second that we do have, tell each other a short paragraph about why it is that we enjoy the smell of dried watercolours or the colour yellow or... you know, just like pick a thing. Or if you've got even less time from that, it's a very problematic film from a disabled perspective, but I always like the bit in Garden State where they make a face that no one's ever made before and they make a weird noise. Like, I used to do that a lot with my stepdad and I think it's genuinely healing to do something like that. You know, there's always a space to do this. And yeah, it can be in a big way. I'm a tarot reader. You're probably changing your life if you're here. You're probably going through major transitions if you're looking to a YouTube psychic to give you any kind of feedback about anything, right? But that's not really what I'm on about. And I'm sort of hoping that this one gets out to a great deal more people. So please share it if you do see it. Because it's kind of... we want to narrow. We want to be in little things. We want to do... we are little people in the end. We are... tiny minds exploring the world and developing as we go, even as we are adults. And part of that is about going small and going, this moment isn't about improvement. Opportunity is coming whether or not I'm being observed. Opportunity is coming whether or not I'm being marketed to about the best ways to seek out opportunity. And that includes for me, because I am here, you know, running a shop. Just hone in on the glitter. I hope that was coherent. I love you lots. I really do. Thank you for supporting the channel if you do. If you don't, it's a good time to do it, right? But you don't need to listen to me because I'm just marketing. Have a frivolous day. Dance in the sun. Or in the dark if you're more of a vampire. That's cool too. See you later.